Say something again. Something, something, something. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 somethings. How's that? My mic is on? Yes. Oh yeah, I got a mic in it.
All right, at this time we're going to go ahead and get the class started. It seems like we have everything in order. So at this time I want to introduce Mr. Ted Isham, a language professor from Oklahoma State University, also a Creek citizen. And we have a very special guest tonight, and that's the Bible sisters here in the back, and they're the direct descendants from the man we're talking about tonight, Mr. James Hill. So it's a pleasure to have them here. And at this time, Mr. Ted Isham.
Round of applause. All right, so tonight, out of the page, you'll see the link. I'm going to go through the phone right now so people can see it shortly. Tonight, and typed it out or wrote it out, is Holwe Nagi, Itki, Ojaga, Istijari, Adrulagi, Inhojifwichka. This is what the old ones called, what the old Indians called things up high, what they seen up high. It's not the actual word for the star because we just realized that the star is called Kojajumba and Kalajwa, two different versions. One is older than the other. So I'm not sure what people use these days, but you hear both forms. So tonight, I just wanted to kind of briefly overview what we're doing. We're going through these texts and trying to unpack them, so to speak. So we're trying to discover what other information that's available. So there are several things that we can pull from these. One on the front of it is the language, right? We can look at the language of it, and we can dissect it that way and figure out how to read it and how to understand and how to work with it. The other story is just premise behind these texts were collected all up and walked the Scotty get a couple of summers down there doing that, and she collected so much material. As we see, the book right here is 850 pages long or something like that. She collected so much linguistic material, she never had a chance to publish it in her lifetime. The World War II came along, and she got moved into teaching Thai, the Thai language for the soldiers, and different other things. And she went on to other tasks and other teaching, and so she had all this material collected away, and then she never got. Her intention was to publish them, but there was so much material she couldn't get to it. So Jack Martin came along, and he was tasked with this project by her. So she turned all of her material over to him, and he finally, it's been a work in progress. How long? He said about 10 years more? 10 years on Jack's effort to get this to the stage. And like I said, it's a wonderful, absolutely beautiful view into our past in a pristine setting, because like this is, we don't want to date this time, and people will be still that pristine look. Glimmer of life in the old days, we'll call it. How much different it is, how much the same it is, how much it's changed, and it can pick according to of it too. And as a people, and all the nations, the native nations of North America are in the same boat. As a people that are constantly losing their culture base, their language base, and their sense of being in this dominant other society, that things like this can help, hopefully, hold that back a bit, you know, push it back, and we can claim what is ours, what is us. And culture is one of those things, and that's what's so beautiful about these this text and all these stories that were given at the time. And so, with that in mind, we look at the stars tonight. So, if you remember last time, I talked about having to unpack this, how to unpack it, and, you know, and the effort belongs to you. However you want. You can just read the English. You can look at the creed and try to learn a little bit more in that fashion. So it's up to you how you want to do this. But so I will show you one thing, or one way that we can do this, and we'll read some of the text. I don't want to read it all, but if you do go to the link, where the material is located on the website, then we have the recordings there of Margaret Malden reading this text in particular. We'll try to get the other text as we can find the links for those and put those up. And so what you can do is you can listen to Margaret speaking it as you're reading it, and that's, to me, it's a lot of help if you're learning the language, wanting to learn the language in its natural form, I guess. But as we all know, learning a language is a lot more than just listening to it every now and then. You have to put some effort into it. So the effort that we want to put into it is actually dissect and unpack a few sentences. So we'll see how that works and see how far we can get. I have a lot of material and not enough time to give it out. So hopefully when we do the internet part, I'll be able to delve into it more in depth, and people that want to go there will have a chance to go there. So, PowerPoint. Let's see here. Okay, so this is the text that we'll be looking at. Let's see, how do I do that? So this is the title that they wrote, the stars, and it reads, Holwi Nagi Hitchki O Jaga Istijari Ajulagi in Hojif Huichka. And so, you know, that's a pretty fascinating sentence for me from a linguistic point of view. So the first part of the word, it says Holwi, is the Ojaga, is what was, or what is, what has. They have. And then Isti, the one with the hyphen, Isti Jari Ajuligi, it's talking about the red peoples, the old ones, the old red people, the old Indians. What the old ones said, I guess is what we would translate it. And then Inhojif Huichka is what they named them things, those things. Inhojifka. Inhojifka, or Hojifka, we know is your name, you know. Chahojifka, Chihojifka. My name is Chihojifka, your name. So we have this extra piece in here. If we look at it, it's that Weej. EC, and then the KV, Inhuichka. And this thing's what they're named, what they're caused to be named. And so they go through, and so what we're going to do right for a minute here, we're going to dissect a few of these sentences just to see what comes up out of those. And of course, we remember how Greek writing in the modern format. I'll post the original handwritten note writings that James Hill wrote, and you'll see the difference between the modern and the old style, what we call the old style. So there's the Greek writing. The second line is the phonemic or linguistic representation of those words. And finally at the bottom is the free translation. We call it the free translation in English because it doesn't match exactly with the words. It's how we would say it in English, so it's been swapped around, and that's what's interesting about figuring out how to work with these texts, is figuring out what words fit with what, and how the sentence is structured differently than what we do in English. So we'll see if we can see some of those things. So here the second sentence, or the first sentence of that story says, Ahology, holy fulla, we hatka in hifke, omis magagunks, Ahology omes des, omosi des. And so the English to that says, the clouds way up high are ocean vapor, they used to say, somewhat like clouds. So in that English sentence we see three pieces. The clouds are way up high are ocean vapor, then they used to say, and then somewhat like clouds. So there's three sections. And you see those three sections in the Greek text. And so somewhat like clouds would be that last piece that says ahology omosi des. Also, it says also, des is also. So it's like clouds. That's what the last part says. So that matches with that last part of that sentence, somewhat like clouds. Ahology is clouds, holy is high, fulla is they are. We hutka is ocean water. In hifkid is smoke or vapor. Omes is the is. So what's left? So what we just said is the clouds way up high are like ocean vapor. That's what we just said. Ahology holy fulla, we hutka in hifkid omes. That's all. So that leaves that one word left, right? Magagunks. Unts, they have an unts. I'm used to saying a K. Magagunks. Yeah. And what that says is that last part that we're not covering. They used to say. So they, in a plural sense, said something. If in the dictionary, so you figure out all these extra things. They used to say, the main part of that word, that phrase is say, right? Something that says. When we go look up say in the dictionary, then we say it comes up with magada. So we see that part of it, magagunks. And so we have to figure out what the rest of that part, what the rest of that word is saying about that phrase. So the what we find out when we look at it over and over again, or we learn it, fluent speakers just learn it. The rest of us, we have to be taught it. Is the ak, that's signifying plural, the they. So they say, now in the sentence there it says they used to say, as in a past tense, so that VNTS is the past tense marker. So it's saying something they said a while back. And in Greek we find out we have 4 different periods of past tense that we can talk about. Things that just happened a minute ago to maybe last night. Things that happened a week to a month ago. Things that happened a month to several years ago. Things that happened a long time, maybe when we was little, some of us. And things that happened way back in the mythic past. What I call the storytelling past. So we have 4 different areas to do a past tense, and here he chose to use unks. Then mutts, he would, instead of unts, he would put a mutts or magagi mutts, or magagundo, magagi gundos, which is a past that we don't use anymore. You'll see that past in some of the Creek songs. Biana, when they say that. When they sing those songs, it says, I'm trying to think of any song that does that. But most of the time, those hymns will use that past tense. But other than that, we don't use that past tense anymore. Unda. Then the uddies, which is that mythic past. So if he was really telling a story about something mythic, like our stories that we have for the rabbit and all those, then it would probably be in an Uddies. Margaguddies, he would have said. So they said that way back, and we would know that it was a mythic past or storytelling. So we move to the next slide, and some more sentences. So I won't break them all down, but we will go through several of these. Then I want to bring up a point about storytelling and different reasons for those. So I would love to go through and read every line of this, but you know, some people, that's not their cup of tea, and it feels redundant to me, but I will do that on the internet. I'll post the slides and have the reading with it. So we break each one of them down, and a narration, I guess, that goes along with it, if anybody wants to go through that depth. So here we have Munga ikuji omozi des suda jiskin azabatlin hijinoman. And then it says, the English of it says, or somewhat like smoke, if they saw them all on the horizon like columns. Is that right? Yeah. I thought I might have missed it. Okay. So, munga would be or, and sometimes you see ikuji is smoke. Omozi des is somewhat. Again, remember we seen that from the last one. Omozi des, also somewhat. Suda is sky. Chiskin, the Azabaklin is several standing. Hijin is sea or saw. And then Oma. So we've covered everything in there. And Oma, when you see Omad on one, it's the if. So there's an if right in the middle. So if there's something that you pull out of this, so that sentence says Suda, Jiskin Azabaklin Hijin Omad. If you hear the Omad on it, then it's an if statement. Say if this happens or if that happens, you know. I give a quiz in our class, and we talk about these what we call affixes and things, and so I treat it like a sermon, and I would say, if you read your Bible, if you love your family, and if you do this, then there's a then usually, then you will go to heaven. But they're always couched on a doma. And if we ever hear extended speech from someone, especially in a ceremonial setting, they always have that omad at the end, omadi, or oma. So what they're doing is they're laying out a pattern of if statements so that they can come to a conclusion with a then statement and make the point. That's one of the hallmarks and one of the reasons why Creek people are such, in the language, are such eloquent orators. It's always been known as that we've been able to do that, and making these kinds of speeches in a ceremonial sense or however, as they bleed over into the regular world, are a hallmark of that. And I think so. Azabaklan, Asvpaklen, and that means to stand. But we don't see it in here, so it's kind of implied that they're standing out there, like columns standing. Well, columns do stand, I guess. But Azabaklan is the plural form of to stand. But if we look up to stand in the dictionary, we would find what? Huithida. But if you look in the dictionary, sometimes it'll give you the other forms. There's a singular form, a dual form for two standing, or for several standing. And here we're talking about columns. Several. So, Azabakla is that one to stand. Let's see, S-T, how do you spell stand? S-T-A. Let's see if I can. This one. So in the dictionary, it says to stand, situated, exist, or having something like standing upright and of one, it says huithida, like you said, huithida. Then it says of two in colons there, it's sihogida. Of three or more, it's sabaklida. Azabaklis, like we say in Sinra in the text, it means they are standing up. So this is a really interesting attribute or phenomenon of the language, and that is that we have these forms that are plural in nature. They have different forms, and those are the things that we kind of have to learn by memory or rote. So things that have to do with motion of people, or that we can do, it usually have these singular, dual, and plural forms. In English, we just add an S generally to make the plural, but here we have three different forms: huithida, what was the other? Sihogida, and azabaklida. So azabaklin is for several to be standing. Then we see that in front of that. There's another affix that's been added to that. And is a directional. So when you're standing, you're not standing down, you're standing up generally. So it's saying they're standing up. And so that brings up, when at the ribbon dance, especially when we're telling the indokbalas are giving the direction for the dance and things, and they go to the women and they say, Azabaklas. That means you all stand. That means they're ready to come on in then. Or next time at ribbon dance, you'll hear it. So the next sentence says, Hazit, Uiwan, Ajawed Omis, Oskathis, Magargunks, Miskit on Noma. So Miskit on Noma, Miskit is summer, and Noma is if, right? Remember that? If it was summer, then it reads, the sun is drawing water, it will rain. So the sun is drawing water is Hazit Wiwan Ajahwet Omis. So sun is Hazit Owiwan or Owan, or however people use the word for water. Then is that one. And Ajahwet means drawing or drawing it out. And Omis is. So Oskathis is what? It will rain. Oski. Rain is Oskida. Or Oski, to rain is Oskida. So Oskathis is different than any of those. We won't find this in the dictionary. So then we see that there's an ending there that's not part of the dictionary. And then Uthis is the future tense. Because we see it. It says will. It will rain. Uthis. Oskathis, it will rain. And of course, Magargans is they say. So what's interesting, if you just look at that sentence right there, they would say, we could also put that at the back of that sentence. It didn't need to start that in English. We could have said, the sun is drawing water. It will rain if it is summer, they would say. We could put it towards the back, but they've chosen to put it in front. But it's interesting that in Greek, it's always at the end. So the next sentence is Hadam Sofot Gondoma Kasapin Athaniromes Margaganks. It's a different dialect than I'm used to hearing. That's kind of interesting. During the winter, they used to say it's going to get cold. So they used to say it's Magargunks at the end. During the winter would be the Hadam Thafut Noma. But we say again winter, if it's again winter, that's what they're saying. During, I guess that would equate out to say during winter, Magargunks they would say, and then they say Kashapathane Omas, Omes. So kasuptin is to be cold. We will see that in the dictionary, but we won't see that athonit. And athonit is another future tense. And I always explain it as that's the Okie speak. It's fixing to. It's fixing to be cold. The other future tense of uthis is it will be cold, maybe a week, we don't, but it's about to, I guess. So it's the Okie speak, athani. But most people today have dropped out of use of that R sound, athani, and they say ahani. So some people, you'll hear that form, ahani, ahanis. Okay, well, I think we'll just read these next two lines and I'll move on to the other things that I have here. And then there's a mark there, holuji da arte, oskathani hinthen os komhoyov. And that mark in front of hology is meaning that there's a sound or a letter missing, a sound generally. It's usually unstressed, and we seen earlier it's the ahology means the cloud. So in fast talk, a lot of those unstressed sounds and syllables get left out. People, as a matter of fact, here's my classic example. People today, what's the word for children? Anybody know? Kids? People today say, be doggy. Right? You hear that a lot, be doggy? The real word is ho boy doggy. We're starting to drop off a lot of the unstressed syllables. And that just happens with language use. The other example that I have is the word for horse that we call today. We call it, it's changed. We call it thakko, right? In the little bit older days, some call it jothakko or jithakko. But even older than that, some people called it ijothakko. So when the Spaniards came here, when De Soto come through our country, they brought their soldiers, pigs and all these new things and disease and junk, and their horses. And the horses running around, they thought, oh shoot, there's a big deer, I'm gonna eat good tonight. So I'm sure they killed a few of those horses thinking they were big deers. So anyway, that's what they called them, big deers. Ijo Thako was big deer. So through the years, that Ijo, the E is kind of unstressed, so it gets dropped off. And then our elders were starting to use it, just say Jithakko or Jothakko. And then today, we even dropped that Jo off and just say Thakko. So the point that I make about all of that is the fact that language is a living, breathing entity. It changes. And people want, or think that they want stasis. They want it to be frozen in time, or they want it to be something that they can hold on to now and forever, but you can't. It moves, it morphs, it changes. And so the harder that people hold on to this concept or idea that it's the same, then it fizzles away on them real quick. It's the people, the future generations that will be able to use it. No matter what we call it today, they're going to call it something else. As long as they know what it is, that's fine. It's the same way with this ahanis. Athanis, Athanis is the older way. The more current version out here is ahanis. So we just have to realize that language changes. And once we can realize that, we can get along and get on with the business of learning this, whatever the form it is that we're seeing. So what's cool about this is the older form that we're looking at a lot of times. And we'll see a lot of things that are different than what we use today. And another facet of what comes out of this, looking at this text, it's really cool. So go back to that sentence. Oskathani was a fiction to rain. He that is really or good, so it is that surely. And Gomhoyov, and that's the wind, they think. Oath is when. When you see oath on the end of a word, it's talking about when it's going to happen. Yeah, so that's what that one says. And komida is to think. So hoi is the plural form of to think. Komhoyo. When they think. When they thought. So the last sentence that we want to look at right here, it says, Oskigo, Holajijari, Haket, Somgibi, Ogida, Unnajoman, Omai. So we see Oskigo. That's kind of similar to the words we saw earlier about Oski, right? So it's rain. It's rain. But it's the negation of it. EKO is not. It's not raining. EKO in there. Holajijari, so it's red clouds are made or become. And Somgibi is to disappear. And the Ogida is the time, and Unnajoman is Oman. Ogida Unnajoman means that several times. If it does it several times, then that's what's going on. So that's how we would look at some of these texts and try to tease out maybe some language of it, and maybe some culture, some cultural aspects of what the language is saying, and how the structure of this is going. So there's all sorts of things that can be done with these texts. It just takes a lot of effort on our part. So I just want to point that out and move on a bit. So we have all these other we'll look at the English of these. That's what we'll do. So we read here it says, somewhat like smoke. They saw them on the horizon like columns. They would say the sun is drawing water. It will rain if it was summer. So these are sayings, right? So we can look at it in that aspect. That's a saying that they had, that they see the clouds way off in the distance. That there's certain, they could tell what's going on in the environment. And we were very attuned to the environment, not like we are today. And then the next saying would have been, during the winter, they used to say, it's going to get cold. When the clouds come and they think it's surely going to rain, but it doesn't, and the clouds become red and disappear several times, it was said the medicine man had been blown. Oh, the medicine had been blown when the clouds turned red and disappeared. Where does it say anything about medicine up there? Anybody know what medicine would be? The word for medicine is hiliswa. I don't see hiliswa in there. So we have, I'll read that sentence because that's kind of cool. Im both Hogan omis, ahology jari hagi oskigo shonga magagons. So it was said, when the clouds turned red and disappeared, medicine had been blown. So im both hogaden is that medicine part. So what do you do when they make medicine? Anybody? The blow. So here it says it again. Or blowing in bofki maga oski honi des alaga hane omi on hijab. So even though the English says medicine, there's no medicine up there, but it's implied because of the blowing aspect of that. Someone's blowing into their medicine tube. And so we say Bingalov at the end. What is Bingalov? There's a test right now. You see the English below it, right? When someone was afraid of awesome black clouds. So what is Bingalov?
Being afraid.
Wind being afraid. Oath is the wind, remember? Wind afraid. All right. So, back to the English, that's what we're doing. When someone's afraid of awesome black clouds and wanting to stop it, he would sing against the oncoming clouds, and a person who stands blowing at it with a reed can stop the rain, he used to say. And then there was other ways, right, of stopping rain and things like that. So a long time ago, there were many rain blowers, men and even women. When those who did not know the song to stop the rain were afraid of rain and tornadoes, they would leave an old axe blade stuck in the ground with the handle upright, facing in the direction from which the cloud was coming. Anybody hear that? We do that all the time. Just for sake, it won't hurt, will it? Unless the tornado thinks it blows that thing at me, but every time we go out there and put a axe out to split the storm. It says there are still people who still do that today. The old axe cuts the cloud in half, and it splits, and it doesn't rain, it disappears, it said. So the next one was when the rain is coming, to stop it before it arrives, pour a small amount of salt in the fire, and it doesn't rain, it goes away, some say. So these are sayings that James Hill is giving Mary Haas. Now I went about believing the things that the old ones said. So one time we were going to spend the night in a camp we had made near town in the evening about 4 o'clock. As we, 2 of us, went about. Why does he say we? And in parentheses, 2 of us went about. The verb in that is went, to go. Went is the past tense of to go. So to go, if we look in the dictionary, it's going to be Ida. But we don't see Ida anywhere. So all we see is we logio. So we see that oath is going to be the when part. And if we look in the dictionary for to go, then we see those 3 forms. Ida, wilagida, and abiyada. 1 to go, 2 to go, wilagida, and several to go, abiyada. So here we have this form, wilagio. What's really fascinating to me about this fact that we have this dual form in the Greek languages, it's a form that we use in the ceremony all the time, where when we're charged with instructions and tasks from our miko, the speaker, through the miko, from the miko, we're always told to do things in pairs. We cannot do anything singular. We have to do it in pairs. And so there's all these words that we hear all the time that are the dual form, and it's really cool. I mean, it's an aspect of our worldview. And you know, on the one hand of it, in the ceremonial sense of it, it's the safe thing to do. When you have a partner, then you know nothing can go wrong. If you're by yourself, things can go wrong. You can get the wrong medicine, you can do this the wrong way, but if 2 of you go, then there's a witness to the act. And it makes the process of the whole event, making the medicine, making the green corn or whatever, more pure. So this aspect of having two is really, I believe, based in that ceremonial part of it. All right, so let's see. I want to move on to, I'll let y'all read all of those, but I want to start, where was it? So this story has these different little stories of sayings and things, and then signs, I guess. So here it says, when the moon has a whitish cloud-like circle around it, they say it's going to rain, and the moon is making itself a shelter. Everybody hear that? You see that ring around the moon? No?
I've heard about raining, but I've never heard that it's making its shelter.
Yeah. But you know, in meteorological terms, that's true. Because what they're saying is those high clouds, those thin cirrus clouds are coming in from a front that's coming in. And they're ice crystals, and so they reflect off of that and make that rainbow-like thing, or that ring. We see the ring. What's cool is this next one, because it will not rain for several days. Each star stands for 1 day that you can see in that circle. And it said the star nearest to the moon is the moon's wife. Where's wife in here? Anybody know what the word for wife is in Greek? There's several modern forms of it. What involves it, idim halakted, but the old form is Ihewa. So Haza Ihewa, the son's wife, and that's an old form, and it has connotations. We'll say. We'll just move on. So this is the part I wanted to bring up. Two stars sitting right close to each other together. So these are the things that what he's naming things that actual stars were called raccoon eyes. So what two stars do you think he's talking about? No idea? Anybody out there? Two stars, raccoon eyes? Okay, how about the star towards the north is called the star that doesn't go? That should be easy. Polaris, North Star. Okay. Crickets, internet, crickets. And the star that comes out at daybreak was called a big star or a morning star. Hayatija, what we talked about earlier. Hayatija, I mean, Hojifit is his name. The morning star. What star is that? Crickets again? Okay, that's fine. And the three stars sitting near each other were called the stretch stars. Kolos Sunijan Hojifit. Anybody have a clue? No? If you didn't have those others, I know you took me a minute to catch it. And there was what they called the water dipper or the star boat. Kolos Pisto. Wish Sakchoga. Sakchoga. Anybody hear those before? Oh man. Okay. You're in for a good one here. The seven stars that sit really close to each other were called Kolos Choklovka. No. And then there's a story about how those stars were and how they ended up too lazy to work and in the spring. So that brings me up to this point where I want to bring this up. So this story tells a story about these stars, but it times it in the spring. It says in the spring they do something else. So what do you think these stories are about when they're stories that are related to things like that? Remember now, we're very connected to the environment. And if we're at night, we're looking up at the stars, and these stories are being told at night, a lot of times. We're marking time, we're marking the seasons, we're marking events. Seasons, exactly. So they disappear but return when the fruit ripens. So there's a star, 7 stars or whatever that come and disappear, and then return. That's cool. Then there's other stories here about shooting stars. And that one I like, it says, they used to say the star is defecating in this direction. So I had to read it because I like this kind of words. All right. Kolazwa aholanet omis gay. That word aholanet or holanida is really cool to me. If you look up in the old dictionary, not so much as Walmart and Malden, we'll have to see what they say, but if you look up in the old dictionary, the one that was presented to us by the missionaries, and you find holanida, what do you find as a definition? It says to ease oneself. What the heck is that mean? Or cover the feet. It said cover the feet. So what they're saying is, oh my gosh. So they tried to cleanse or fix our language for us. It was crazy. Linda Alexander used to say, because everybody takes the Greek classes, want to know, first thing they want to know, I want to know all the bad words, the ugly words. Well, there's no bad words in Greek. They're just body functions. A holanida is body function. For those Puritans to try to cover it up like that is really classic. It's going to be interesting to see what Jack and Margaret have. All right. I just had to get that out of me. So that which looks like a small cloud flying across the sky, i.e. the Milky Way, when he gives it away, they give it away. They call it the path of the dead or path of the spirits. Anybody hear that before? So, Muskogee Innini Omis, Isti Ili Innini, those two. All right. And I know I'm going reaching out here, and so this last one that I want to say, this last two sentences says, there are pillars underneath this earth we walk on, and the earth is sitting on them. Those posts are great pokeweeds, I heard old men tell. So the belief, so this is my cosmology speech, Creek worldview, and some of these texts will talk about it. The belief is we as humans live in this plane of reality called what we're on the earth. So the reality is there's three. There's the underworld, this world, the middle world, and the upper world. And on those worlds, supporting each of them are these columns on the four corners. And they had names. And then there's it's like an inverted bowl sitting on top of us is what we believe. And then underneath is the underworld animals and things. So the birds are part of that upper world. And if we talk about clan lineage, we can see that. Then there's the clans that live under the underworld, so to speak, or below earth. Anybody heard of the Wipujazi? The Stukwanaya? Nobody? The tire upper? The thing that comes and gets you to Honka? You know, Cherokees call them Uktana, I think. Oh, okay. Crickets, internet crickets. We have a clan that our chief is supposed to be pulled from at Halevi, and it's the Aktayajogi. And Aktayaji is a mythic creature that lives underneath the underwater. Wipujazi is the water panther. So like the Seminoles, I'm not sure too much of the Creeks. You have a panther clan, but the Seminoles have a panther clan, and it's related to those underwater or underworld. So we have this all-encompassing viewpoint of how the cosmos works, and one of the hallmarks of dealing with that is watching the sun do its thing every day. And we watch it and watch it and watch it and get timings down. We learn when the ceremonial season starts. So this is my ceremonial season speech also. We're coming up on that time where right now we're in the winter time, right? So the beginning of winter started December what? 21st. Spring starts March 21st. Yeah. And if you look at the sky from the winter time, December 21st to March 21st, what happens in the morning? Well, the day gets longer, right? So what that point, and it's getting off time with our calendar. But anyway, that's what it's marked. And then our summer solstice time is the furthest north that the sun will move, midsummer, which is what day? June 21? June 21, yeah. Summer solstice. So every tribe in North America celebrates something at that time. It's very important to us. So what we do is we watch where that sun rises at all throughout the year. So when it's on the north half of the vernal equinox, that's our coming out time. That's our ceremonial season. That begins our ceremonial season. When it gets past and goes south, it's starting fall and winter. We start to put things away and close up. So that marks a highly significant moment for us, from that point on, when we're into spring and summer. So when we start our ceremonial cycle, if it's that time or not, whatever, every ground is different. When we start it, that marks the point when we can start to plant our corn. So how long does corn take to be ready? Anybody know, farmer-wise? About 90 days, right at 90 days. So in 90 days, which happens to be green corn time, it's no accident. All of this is really tightly woven, tightly knitted, and it fits so well, and it's beautiful. To see it coming out in these stories like this, or just knowing about that, it's really cool. So my point about all this is there's a lot more to what we think we know than maybe that the general public knows, or even a lot of the people themselves will know. But it's out there. We just have to go out and sniff it out and dig it up and roll it around in our tongue and mouth and just see what it feels like. But that information is out there. There is so much information about the cosmology and life ways. So one of the things that is out there, I'm not too sure if we adhere to a lot of this here in Oklahoma as Creek people, or even as Seminoles in Florida. But there is this belief that, it's based on this idea that there's a coming out time and a receding time, or retreating back in time. Duality that we adhere to. And we see it in our town lineages and our clan lineages, red and white. There's two halves of our being. So of course the white is our ceremonial time, and our red time is time of war. And that will come up later in a moment when I talk about that. So everything that we do is couched in this idea of two ends, a yin and a yang, so to speak, red and a white, peace and war, kind of. Not actually, but in that kind of vein. So everything is laid out in that way. So when we're on the positive side, or the past spring, past the vernal equinox, then the Miko takes over. But when it gets down to the other side in the fall and winter, the Miko Obokta takes over. You know what the Miko Obokta is? It's the chief's twin. So we have this concept of a twin. And Greek mythology and all that talks about the hero twins. And, the Aztec and the Maya talk about the hero twins. The Cheyenne and Dakotas, they talk about twins. It's a very common theme, but we actually named our leaders that. And we see that in the iconography of our relics that are dug up in the mounds that we left behind in our homelands. So when we made this new transition here to Oklahoma, and were forced into this new form of government, we modeled instead of the tribal form of government that we had, with the tribal towns being the core of it, we paid tribute to the tribal towns when we formed a new government, when we moved here, and we made our leaders, we call them the chief, and today we call them the chief and second chief, right? In the old form of that would have been Miko and Miko Obokta, twins, equal in stature. But what do we do today? Like the white people, we put one above the other. We make the second chief subservient to that one, or lower in stature. When they're equal, like I said, when it's positive time or white time, then one chief takes over, when it's fall and retreat time, then the other chief takes over. So we have two chiefs that interact, and they're the complement of each other. That's the term I'm going to be using. And so this idea of duality really fits tightly. It's tightly woven into who we are. And again, I'm not too sure how many people here in Oklahoma as Creeks adhere to that concept. But there are people still in Florida and Georgia that have that information. So, moving on. Any questions? Anybody have any stories about stars? So I asked you earlier, the two stars, the raccoon eyes. You see that this video here? It's playing. What's it doing? It's showing more stars, but in the beginning, I'll show you. So it's taking them away. And what happens when they rise is this is what we see. We see just two little stars out there. And so that what he calls a Woodcote Tuflin are the Pollux and Castor of the Gemini constellation. And so there's a European version of it in a star map, and how it would see look in the sky, so it's kind of upside down. So Castor and Pollux would be these two stars right here. And they rise up. And again, I'm not sure how many people here in Oklahoma would say that, but I've named every one of these. So this is the step aside. This is Ted Isham's version of the world here, so it's nobody else. So here, Kolos Ayigom. So ego is don't, is not, right? Ayi is to go. That's the one that doesn't go. The star that doesn't go. So it's a time picture. That's why they call it the North Star. That's why if you're lost, you find it. It'll always lead you know where north is. And then Hayatija, the morning star, is Venus, planet Venus. It's also an evening star too, but we didn't make that connection. The Mayans did, and they timed their big calendar on that 52-year cycle that comes out of this. So on one side, as it catches up to the Earth, it's in the morning. It gets in front of the sun, then it becomes an evening star after it passes the sun. So the next one is Kolos Sinigin, the stretched out stars. Anybody know or Orion the Hunter? What's interesting about that? No. Oh, did I move it? Sorry. Interesting about that is what people see in his belt or I mean in this whole stars that they see. It rises up in the east. So when it rises up, it stands up. So when you see it up here, it's kind of over here. But when it rises up, as it comes up, it was very significant for people. Also, there's a belief that this line right here, when it comes down, especially in the lower latitudes, not here in Oklahoma, but in Florida, it lines up right on the horizon. So when those three stars are coming up, there's two stars on the edge that pop up at the same time. And that's the belief that this is the edge of the portal. The Mayan and Aztec believe, they call it Orion's sword, believe that this space here, it's a nebula and it's real tenuous. believe that that's the portal to the other side. They call it, anybody know? Ziboba? Something like that. What's really cool, taking it another step outside again, Ted-Isham version, is that is what the people saw, a hand. And in that hand was the portal. And there's, of course, that line, and the fingers match with the pieces out here. And we see that hand. Where do we see that hand image? No, I have to wait. So this is the Collage Bitho, the star boat, or Wee Soktoga. I've always heard it as the boat. And there's a story with that. So here's the Big Dipper as a dipper. I just flipped this over. So here it is as the boat. So here there are people standing on the boat, rowing it. What's interesting about all of these is you see back in these artifacts from the archaeological digs, images that match these things. Or Pleiades. Anybody know what the story about Pleiades? Captain Hook? Is that his name? The one that went to Hawaii? Anyway, whichever, I think it's Captain Hook, but I forget. He went to Hawaii. First time they seen the white man, and he got on, and he came during when Pleiades was up or down. I don't remember which one there is, but they divide their year into time of war and time of peace. And he came in the time of peace. So they welcomed him with open hands. Of course, he did all his nasty and dirty things they did, and he thought it was wonderful and went away and came back. But he came this time in the not peacetime, and he got his ass kicked. He didn't realize this, but a lot of cultures, a lot of people of the Americas have this kind of concept, the Pleiades. I think they're right now. Oh. Looks like a small cloud. Everybody see that one before? Of course, we can't see much of it here in the city. At the ceremonial grounds, it's just beautiful. I mean, I sit there watching all night long. There's stories about that path, that Puyafiksha Chulgi in Nini. They say it's the path of the dead, but when it'll rise up over here like this, and then it'll tail around, and the other end will hit the horizon on 90. So when they say when it hits the horizon on the west, and I believe that's west, that's where the spirits get off and go to the west. You know, we have that belief that our spirits go to the west, and that's the reason why. So there it is again, touching the west. Maybe rising. But there's a story about that. So the path is, the spirits get on and they go and along the path, and if you look at it real close, there's a piece of it. And they say that there's a bridge and there's a dog there, and you have to answer a question to the dog. If you don't answer it right, then you get sent back. And you get stuck in some kind of loop until you answer it and you can go on. So some more iconography from Moundville in Alabama. Hand and eye. That's a very common image in all of the pottery and things that they find. I didn't place much significance to it. I knew it until, and I don't remember his name, as a gentleman came, he was fairly elderly, but he was all in black. And he led a dance, and of course we had a fire and it was going real high. And oh my God, he'd come up and he'd put his hands down like that, and all you could see is the palms of his hands. That just reminded me of that so much. It was cool. about peed myself. Hey, I mean,
We got it.
I just want to make sure how much that got me. So this is another piece of iconography that comes from there. What they think this symbolizes is the Milky Way. One side is a butterfly, and this side here is two kidney-shaped mace, and then the hand and eye symbols. But these represent actual stars, and one is the twin star that we just talked about, and I forget what the moth is, but it's an actual star set up there. But the belief is, and these are the soul carriers. These are what carry your soul. So when a person dies, when are they dead? In modern terms, we know when either the brain activity stops, right, or the heart stops. How do you think the elders did? The old ones. They didn't have EKGs and all that. They could have listened to the heart maybe. But sometimes you can still be barely alive, even if your heart is where you can't hear it. So what they believed was the soul and the center of our essence was in our liver. When that liver became cold, you're dead. Especially when they did animals, when they cut open the animals, especially in the cool, you would see the steam rising up out of it. And it was still kind of alive, I guess. But if it didn't, then they knew it was dead. So the next thing is, this one is the moth. Do we know what the moth does? It's, again, considered a soul carrier. My grandma used to tell me this story when we were tiny. I never attached it to anything until I realized what she was. In a lot of the iconography, they have these pots and things made in these and what she used to tell us to make us go to sleep, he goes, you're going to have that moth come and sew your eyes up. And that is a representation of being dead. And that's what the moth does. So anyway, that was my connection to her, some kind of story that she grew up with, and she never knew. Hero twins. Hero twins again. And the portal, they call it, they named, the archaeologists named it OG, but that's that portal representation. Oh, Stuckwanaya. Cherokees call them Uktena. We call them, Stuckwanaya. The thing that is in the water, it's a water snake kind of thing with wings and antlers, or deer horns sometimes. Some people say deer horn. Not deer woman, deer horns. Water panthers, representation. Water snakes with panther or dog. So, it's kind of a cross between all of those. So we can learn something from what we see in the iconography, the artifacts that they dig up, that they have dug up in the different places. And we always hear stories of the tie snake stories, the Birdman. You hear stories about the medicine people that can change themselves into skinny, all that. I'm not done yet, so fuck with that. So, my point about all of this is we can learn a great deal from what the Heckies have disgraced us with by digging up all of these and looking at them and studying them and thinking about them, how our ancients, our elders would have used them. They didn't make those things just to be making them. There was a purpose behind everything. There was a purpose behind the way they made those mounds and the way they oriented those, so we could watch the sun and get timings. There were stories that told us what clans we belonged to up there in the sky, and that was the time to tell those, is at night. At Kolomoki Mound, there's at the top of the mountain, there's the level plaza, then there's probably about a 5-foot little rise. It's probably about, well, it's a little bit longer than the table. And it was oriented to the south, and so that was where the people, the main person, the storyteller, I guess, or the whatever you want to call him, I'll call him the astronomer, would have told those stories to the people that were down just below him, because it was faced just perfectly to the, not to the direct south, but to the off south, and it was perfectly situated to see the whole skies. Those are fun places to be in the middle of the night. So stories, placement of things. You know, people did not do these things just by haphazard. There's a reason. Why do you think we have these stories? If you look in the text, if you look in John Swanton's book, Tuggle, any of these creation myths and legends of the Creek Indians, Grantham's book, there are sets of stories. Those stories, for the majority of time, are what? Well, what do you think a story is about? It tells us about how to behave, maybe, is what we always hear, right? It tells us about how things are described in nature, but the majority of them have no real purpose, we think. They're just stories. The rabbit does this, the rabbit does that, but what we find out is there's a ton of stories that the rabbit does something. Why? The rabbit is important to this whole story. George Bunning told me that those stories, those rabbit stories, are connected. They're one long narrative. And they relate to what we just talked about, timings. They tell us when we can do things, when we should do this and that. And they're all related to one long narrative. And I wished I had grabbed it when he was alive. Woulda, coulda, shoulda, all of us. But anyway. Mado Chigeste. I'm done. Come here. I don't know if I run out of time. Oh, questions? Questions?
Yes, one question.
Okay.
Leave it on.
On the Seven Sisters,
Seven.
doesn't have an English interpretation.
Chokolovka doesn't have nobody can remember what that means. Even James Hill. I was hoping he had, because I asked and I asked and I asked, and nobody knows what that means. It's really cool. So it's a mystery. I love mystery.
That's Ted World.
My world, and welcome to it.
At this time, I'm going to call Robin York, a.k.a. Beef Hard Joe. She gave an excellent